Hello everyone. Only 1 week has passed since the war between the United States, Israel, and Iran began. But in just 7 days, something happened that could reshape global politics for years. Oil prices are rising. Missiles are flying across the Persian Gulf. Energy markets are getting nervous. And countries in the region are suddenly realizing that even US military bases do not guarantee security. So, the big questions today is simple. Is this just another Middle Eastern conflict? Or are we watching the beginning of a much larger global crisis? Let's calmly break down what is this actually happening. First, according to military analysts, the operation is costing the United States roughly $900 million per day. For the American budget, that is still manageable. But even for the world's largest military power, wars at this scale quickly become extremely expensive. During the first week, there were hundreds of airstrikes across Iranian territory. The targets included military bases, missile storage facilities, IRGC infrastructure, logistic hubs. Humanitarian organizations report that thousands of civilian structures have been damaged during the strikes. Unfortunately, that often happens during large-scale bombing campaigns. And the numbers of casualties continues to rise. But militarily, the situation turned out to be much more complicated than many expected. Second, air superiority has not been achieved. Despite the massive air campaign, the United States and Israel still do not fully control Iranian airspace. Iran's air defense systems are still operating, especially in the eastern and northeastern parts of the country. This means that every deeper strike into Iranian territory carries significant risk for pilots. The fewer aircraft fly inside Iran, the higher the chance of encountering mobile air defense systems. Because of that, a large part of operation is now conducted using drones. The drone war American forces are heavily reliant on unmanned systems, including the well-known MQ-9 Reaper drones. However, even these systems are not invulnerable. US officials have already acknowledged the loss of several drones during the operation. At the same time, the US has begun deploying new low-cost loitering drones. These are relatively cheap strike drones designed to hit targets without risking pilots. The idea is simple. It is better to lose a drone than to risk a human crew. But even with drones, achieving full control over Iranian airspace remains difficult. Iran is responding asymmetrically. Instead of trying to compete directly with US air power, it focused on missiles, drones, attacks on regional infrastructure. Over the past week, strikes have affected several countries across the region. Missiles were intercepted over Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. Reports also mention damage to military facilities in Kuwait. And one drone reportedly struck a residential tower in Dubai. This sends a clear signal. Even countries hosting US military bases are now exposed to the consequences of escalation. The energy shock. But the biggest global impact of the war is happening in energy markets. Oil prices began rising rapidly. Gas prices in Europe are already at their highest level in 3 years. Several LNG tankers have changed routes. Instead of heading to Europe, they are now moving toward Asia. Meanwhile, European gas storage levels are unusually low. This creates the risk of another energy crisis. As a result, European politicians are now discussing things that seemed impossible not long ago. For example, increasing energy imports from countries they previously tried to reduce dependence on. When energy security is threatened, geopolitical principles can change very quickly. Iran's strategy. Many analysts believe Iran has been preparing for this scenario for years. And its strategy is relatively straightforward. Iran does not necessarily need to win on the battlefield. Instead, it can create instability across the region. If energy infrastructure in the Persian Gulf becomes unsafe, global markets react immediately, and economic pressure begins to build on countries involved in the conflicts. Energy is the backbone of the global economy. Disrupt it, and the consequences are felt everywhere. Situation inside Iran. Interest, Interestingly, reports from journalists indicate that inside Iran there is no widespread panic so far. Daily life in major cities continues. There are no massive shortages or panic buying reported. Iranian officials say that the country's military command structure has already adapted to wartime conditions. At the same time, they warn that a ground invasion could dramatically escalate the conflict. So now is what about global reactions? International reactions remain mixed. Some European countries criticize the strikes. Others quietly support the US and Israel. But global markets are becoming increasingly nervous. Investors fear that further escalation could trigger a wider economic shock. If the conflict drags on, the consequences may spread far beyond the Middle East. So, was a quick victory expected? Many experts believe the original plan assumed a short military campaign. But after only 1 week, it is already clear that the situation is more complicated. Iran is still capable of retaliating. Regional tensions are rising, and energy markets are reacting strongly. This means the conflict could last longer than expected. So the real question today is this. Is this just a limited military operation or the beginning of a longer period of instability in the Middle East? Because if energy markets continue reacting like this, the consequences will affect the entire world, from Europe to Asia. The coming weeks will show whether the situation de-escalates or moves in the opposite direction. Let me know. What do you think in the comments? Is this the start of a larger war, or will the situation stabilize soon? Subscribe to the channel. Here we break down global events calmly with facts and without unnecessary noise. See you in the next video. Bye bye.